Hi everyone, this is Aki with another Google Sheet video on the top 20 basic and most frequently used functions. And we'll go over the functions that are most practical, especially if you're a beginner. You should probably start with these functions. And most of the functions I discuss, I'm talking about the basic function, and sometimes there's sister functions that I call. There are functions that are very similar to the main function we're going to be talking about, but maybe it's like a level up, but something you should be aware of, or maybe it's an alternative function to the one we're discussing. So it's good for you to know about. We're going to talk about some operators that you can use in Google Sheets, where to get more help, and so on. So let's get started. So the way to use functions in Google Sheets, you just have to click on a cell. You can either single click or double click. If you double click, you see the cursor, you can start typing. If you single click, you don't see anything, but you can start typing. You have a blue border around the cell, meaning it's activated. You can start typing by pressing equal. So all the function starts with equal. And Google Sheets is smart enough to make suggestions for you. I mean, even though in our case here, we have the sum car sales data right here, it's telling us to sum these columns across, but it wouldn't make sense because we will be double counting quarter 1, 2, and then sum of quarter 1, 2. So you always have to be aware, even though you know functions, it's on you to make sure that the function and the calculation in the function, the ranges you specify, are making sense, because this is kind of like a tool, but it is still on you to perform the analysis and make sure that it's making sense. So you can either accept the suggestion by just pressing enter, and if you don't like that, you can just keep selecting what you want. So like right now, I'm going to, let's say, select this cell, and you can drag across ranges. So if I select this and drag, I can select more than one cell. You can also select ranges that are not next to each other by clicking Command and selecting another range, and then making sure you have parentheses at the end. We're going to talk about some best practices about Google Sheets. So I'm going to share with you what you should be aware of if you're new to functions and using Google Sheets. You want to use parentheses. These are your friends, because parentheses kind of make sure that the operation is kind of mathematically correct what you want it to do. And that's why when you have things in parentheses, whatever it's in parentheses is going to be calculated first, and anything outside the parentheses, it's second, and so on. But it's very important to use them. Another thing I want to show you, if you click the equal for formula and start typing your formula, you will also have suggestions from Google Sheet of other formulas that start with these letters. So you can specify, because sometimes you might not remember exactly the formula, it's something with a sum, so it shows you the options. Now let's say if I do select this formula, I selected it, but if you want to have more help, let's try one more time. You can click on the formula like that, and then you can have this arrow right there to expand for more information, and then you can also click Learn More to actually have more help show up on the right of your Google Sheet, which is very helpful. And all the function, if you want to get out of a function, like right here, I want to get out of this cell, you just click Escape to get out of the cell. There's also an icon at the top of your toolbar. It's called Functions. If you click on that triangle down, let me just close this help here. Then it shows you the top functions, the main ones people use the most, which is sum, average, count, max, minimum. And then you have all these other categories of functions, and each of them can be drilled down farther for more information. And then you can also click Learn More, and you actually are taken to Google Sheet function list, and it's very long list. And so, it's very intimidating, but don't worry about it. You don't have to. You want to learn how to use Google Sheets for you, for your purpose, and one thing at a time. So don't worry about it. There's many of the functions that I don't know if 0.5% of people even know what they do and how to use them. So majority of people use the basic, intermediate functions, and these are the ones we're going to start with. You can narrow down the function by the categories the same way as on the Google Sheet. And you can also start typing the name here And once you find the function that you want, let's say, where's our function? Right here. You can just click Learn More, and you're going to be taken to the similar section with examples and more information how to use the function that you want to use. Now, the operators that we want to use, we start the function with equal, then we can use minus for subtraction, plus for addition, star for multiplication, and slash for division. You can also use less than, more than, less than, equal, more than, equal in your calculation and in your functions. And of course, we want to use parentheses. And I'll show you some examples of some of these operators and what happens if you're using a function but you're not being careful and it's not really calculating what you think it's calculating. So we will go over that, and I'll try to show you some of the typical errors as well. Now, let me show you some examples of the simplest way you can use a function by just using addition. If you click equal, you can select a cell, say plus, and then select another cell, and you can keep going. You can add more than 2 and more, and you can keep going. What you want to then, and then you want to press return. So it's a simple addition. Now, let's maybe make things that are making sense here. Let's just add these 2 quarters. I like to show examples that are making sense because it's very important that Google Sheets is just a tool for your analysis or for your usage, and you want to make sure you learn then the functions you're using are creating calculations that are making sense. Now, if we use subtractions, let's say we want to have this total for 2 quarters, and we want to subtract 2 cells from 2 automakers, like let's say Tesla, and subtract another one. So you can subtract as many as you like and press enter. This will tell me, okay, this is the amount of car sales for half a year less Tesla and Subaru, but you want to make sure it's referring to the correct information. So if you click on that cell with your formula, you look at the formula bar at the top bar of Google Sheet, and you click on it. Basically, it will show you what is the formula referencing. So it's referencing these 3 cells. It doesn't tell me exactly specifically what is it doing, but you can see by colors, like the first one is D21, so it's in orange, and the other one's in very similar colors. And unfortunately, the formula bar is very small, and I do have an issue with that. I was trying to find out how to make it larger, and one thing that I have used is basically using a magnifier to kind of show you what's going on here. And hopefully, this will help you see exactly what's going on here in the formula bar. So we will use that magnifier from time to time. Now, if you want to multiply, you can use equal, then you select, let's say I'm going to select, let's actually use parentheses. Let me show you. So let's say if I'm going to take the quarter cell 1 plus quarter cell 2, and then multiply by 2 to get an estimate for full year sales. And this is the amount. Now let me show you what happens if I don't use parentheses. If I just use quarter 1 plus quarter 2, and then I multiply by 2, the number is completely different, because what is it doing? Let's look at our magnifying there. It's actually, let me just specify here. What is it doing? It's taking, in mathematical calculation, multiplication is before addition. So Google Sheet is multiplying quarter 2 cells and adding it to quarter 1 cells. So it's not taking quarter 1 plus quarter 2 and multiplying. So that's why parentheses are so important, because they prevent you from making mistakes like this. And whenever you look at an analysis, you always have to look at it and you think about it if it makes logically, it doesn't make sense. And you're looking at the total for here, we have a calculation, it does make sense. The other number was not making sense. So you want to learn to do that, like as a best practice. Now division, we say equal. Let's say we going to look at the total here, grand total sales, and divide it slash by how many automakers, we have 15 here. So now it tells me that 458,000 was the amount of car sales on average for each of the automakers. So this is the way how to use the basic operators, and you can combine them in our formulas. You can do subtraction, addition, multiplication, division in one formula. You just want to make sure you use parentheses so the formula is making sense. Number one function that we should discuss is sum, and the sister of it is SUMIF. And there's also some ifs, but we're just going to go and discuss these two. So sum function you will use all the time. You can just start typing equal, sum, and now you can select what you want to add up, and you can select a range and press enter. Then you can take that formula and you can use Command C and copy where you want it to go. But a quicker way is if you select the formula, at the bottom right corner you have this blue square, and this like kind of crosshair is showing up this cross that you can just take and drag down, and you can let it go and the formula copies over. Now SUMIF, it's a sister function, and it's kind of very helpful if you have a lot of data and you want a specific analysis of certain sums with some criteria. So let's say we want to find out the car sales for these, maybe we're referencing this information, like this information is in one tab and one sheet, and this we want it in some dashboard and some summary in some other place in our worksheet. Then you can do SUMIF and show how much for these specific automakers, how much they made in sales in half a year, if 2022. So we say SUMIF, now we put parenthesis, and now here we have to specify first criteria where we're going to look in our table. So we want to find BMW in this table, so we want to find BMW here, and we want to come across and take the year quarter 1 and quarter 2 sales calculations and put it there. So I'm going to specify look for BMW in this range, and then use the criteria, and I can either type in the criteria in quotation marks and select the criteria. I like to select it because sometimes anything manually you do, you have to be aware of that someone, if they have to review it, they have to go into the cell and double check it. References are better, because especially if you can copy over multiple cells. So best practice is try to use formula versus manual entries. And now I want to say where you want to sum. So I'm just going to use maybe the column D. So I'm going to say find the sum from this column, and I'm going to close the parenthesis. And it's saying 165 was the half a year sale for BMW. Then double check it is correct. Now if I take this formula and drag it, what is happening? This is not correct. Why? Because let's look at our formula. This is referring to look for BMW in here and then sum it from here. However, if we go to the next list for the formula for Honda, let's see where's the calculation. It's actually moving down one to grand totals because we are using relative references. So this is a perfect example of when you have a function, you want to make sure that it's calculating and referencing the correct stuff. So we want to change, say the range will not change. We want to change it to absolute reference. So I'm going to select this. And the way to make it absolute, if you click function F4 on Mac, and then for the sum of the range, this will not change. It will always be the same, that range. F4. Now, if you ever want to do a reference just for column or row, you have to just rotate through F4 several times to find what you're needing. And now, if we're looking at their formula here, you can see that we have absolute reference. And now we can press enter. And now we can copy the formula. Oops. Down. And now, does it make sense for Toyota? Let's double check ourselves for Honda. It is. And you also want to maybe create some quality check calculations for yourself somewhere along your worksheet to double check that your formula is making sense. I'm going to show you one more example for SUMIF. So here is a perfect example. I have data for population for United States by state and region. And we want to find out, let's say, calculate the population, total population for 2022 based on region. So I don't have to go like each individual, try to find or filter something. This is a perfect example of using SUMIF. SUMIF, and I'm going to say, look for this region in this column. And I can select actually a column like this. Now, however, the best practice is to make sure you know if you have there's no more rows below that you're not aware of. Maybe there's data somewhere low in the worksheet. So you want to be pretty certain that there's no other data but this in this column. And then put comma. Now I'm going to link to reference this name. So it's just easier, comma. And now I'm going to say then add the population from this column. And now I'm going to remember I don't need to make a relative or absolute reference here because it's selecting the whole column. So it's like it's easier this way. However, you do want to double check and make sure there's no data below somewhere. Now, for example, what I would do is to check myself. It's do a quick sum here of these regions and double check that that's exactly what I have for total, and I do. So this is the way to use SUMIF and sum and to double check your work. Number 2, minimum and maximum. So these functions calculate the lowest value in your range and the highest value in your range. So we have the data here on the states, and let's say if we want to quickly find out, what's the state with the fewest people, we can just say equal min, and then we can specify, we can either select the whole column or we can specify a range, close the parenthesis. And I also am going to change the format here so we can see it easier. So the fewest amount of people, one state has 579,000 of people living in that state. And then let's say do the same thing for max, and I'm going to select this column. And then we know, oh, you see, this is a perfect example of what happens if we're using the whole column instead of a range. Look what happened. There is no state with 335 people. That's the whole United States. So I know now that there's a problem here. So that's why you have to always analyze your results, even if you're using functions. So in this case, you see, this is a perfect example where we actually going to maybe go back to both of them because it doesn't make it's not affecting the minimum range because we're looking for the lowest number. So I'm going to go back to our formulas, and now I'm just going to specify a range by just dragging it up to the last state. And now I'm going to, you can also copy formulas. Like if I don't want to go and do the absolute reference and change it, I can just copy this formula here and go to that cell, change it, and then paste it and then change the formula right there. So sometimes it's like I don't know, I like it. It's a quicker way sometimes than doing the absolute references. So now here I know that the most populous state has 39 million people, which is California. Right there we have a rank. And the least populous state is 579 people, and we can check by rank, it's Wyoming. So this is the way to use minimum and maximum function. Number 3, subtotal. So that's a function that's very useful, especially if you have any calculation when you're calculating sums a lot and you want to do sums for categories, subcategories, and so on. So you want to be careful that you're not double counting something. So let me show you an example what happens. So let's say I have these average annual expenditures for American consumers for 2020, and for here we have housing expenses and transportation. And I have some subcategories here listed, monthly as well as annual. So I'm going to create a formula to sum this drag it, and I'm going to copy the formula across. Now, let's say if I try to copy here and do the same with transportation, remember what you have to do. You have to go back to the formula, click on the formula bar, and you can see right here it's referencing row 13 to 17, which is not correct because I copied over from a place where it was just one. How many rows is this? That's 5 rows, and this one has 7 categories. So you want to double check if you're pasting something, you want to double check the reference is still correct. So I'm going to go here and specify the range manually, and now I can copy to the right, and now it's making sense. Okay, now let's say this is, for each of the subcategories I have it and the total, and now I want to add transportation and housing together. So I'm going to create grand total for housing and transportation. I'm going to do this, maybe do a different color, and let's see, and maybe make it a little bit bigger. So now I'm going to say sum, and I'm going to select the whole range and copy it across. And so now I'm thinking, does this make sense? 62,000. So I look at the total for housing, it's 21. For transportation is 9. So if you want to add them quickly yourself, you can put, 21 and 9 is about 30, right? So I know it's off, but if I want to just double check, if I select a cell, command, and click another cell, in the bottom right corner, I have a quick sum and some calculation, average, minimum, max, count numbers. So I know here that these numbers that I selected sum up to 31,000, which is not 62. You can always change the default by just selecting something else and then changing it to something else. So this is off. And why? Because I'm double counting the sums here, the subsums. So the way to avoid it is to use subtotal formula function. So here I'm actually going to say subtotal, and now here it's going to ask me what function did you want it for subtotal, and you can use several. So if I click this help and learn more, it will show me, okay, you can use the subtotal for average, count, minimum product, blah blah blah. 9 is the one that most often is being used, so I'm going to use 9. This is the code for do the sum subtotal, and now I'm going to specify the range, enter, and you won't see a change here because it's just still adding it like regular sum. However, you will see a change for the total, because what the function does, it's saying don't double count. If you see a subtotal, you ignore it. So I'm going to do this, so nothing changed. And our total is still not changing because we're just using plain sum function. So here, let's change it to subtotal 9. And now I'm going to select the whole range and take the formula and copy it. And now it's making sense, 31,000. And I know because I could double check by just selecting these two numbers and looking at the calculation right there. So that's the way to use subtotal function.